Hi Rosie, Jackson, and Jonah. So, made you a video of how I made that light. I'm going to narrate over it. It's a bit long at about, it's going to be a little over 8 minutes, but rather than cutting it down, I figured you guys would like this version where I actually narrate and explain what I did. So, hope you guys like it. Love you guys, and I'll see you in a week or two. Alright, so this is where the light originally was in this apartment, and they were removing it to update the whole apartment. This is what it looks like now. But I didn't want the light to get thrown away, so I grabbed it from Levi, disassembled it before this started, and my first task was to completely disassemble it and take out all the old wiring. I decided pretty quickly that the chain wasn't going to be reusable, so pretty much just scrapped that. I started cleaning all the pieces with a mixture of soap and water for this. Cleaning was a bit tedious. There's a lot of paint oversprayed on the light over the years. I think it's from at least the 70s, so the light's probably 50 years old easily. Everything in the house before it was updated was about that old. This top part was actually the most difficult to clean because in between each of those bulges, there's a lot of paint I couldn't get to with that scrubber. So I tried doing it with my fingertips and stuff, but eventually I just had to get a little tiny screwdriver and use that to scrape it out of in between. All these videos have been cut down quite a bit for the sake of time, because even though they're time-lapsed, still when I ran all the videos together without cutting, it was well over 20 minutes, and that's not including the stuff I added at the beginning. So here I got a string of new wire, and it already has the plug on it. That's not necessary. You can always add a plug if you were ever to do it yourself. Here's where I got my scrap copper. So any copper we take off a job, I actually keep the copper because you can sell it to the scrapyard for money. Well, I thought it'd be fun to turn this ceiling light into a nighttime light, and here I'm sneaking away to, I was also working on a clock at the time that I was restoring. That was going to get thrown out too. But the copper, I thought it would make a cool lampstand, but it's all really dirty and patina. It has a lot of green buildup and stuff. And one thing that works well for getting that loosened up is white vinegar and water, actually. So then as I'm cleaning them, I'm also here using a torch and heating it up to remove the solder, just take everything apart. Sorry for the gaps in this. I'm kind of watching it for the first time and just kind of narrating freestyle. Trying to remember what I did. At that point, I'm measuring everything, trying to see what I need to work with for making a stand, because needed the base to be wide enough, needed the arm to be able to hang over the base, and also needed to center it over there. So there's a bit of me sitting here with the torch, taking apart all these pieces of copper. I wasn't actually sure at all at this point what my plan even was. I just figured I'd start separating all of the copper and just think about it. Come up with an idea for how I'm going to use this for the project as I'm spending all the time soldering and taking stuff apart. Here I got the mixture of vinegar and water, and some of the stuff was on there pretty stubborn. You had different buildups, not only patina, but you'll get different mineral buildups depending on where the copper was or paint. So I used a steel wire brush to clean them off. You don't need gloves for vinegar, but I particularly hate the smell of it and didn't want my hands to smell like that. Sitting over the bucket was actually pretty unpleasant because I hate that smell. But it cleans copper off just amazingly. And you see me cleaning and taking apart a lot more than's ever used in the lamp because, like I said, I didn't actually have an idea for this part of it yet. I just knew I wanted to use copper. And then basically once I took everything apart, I had a lot of ideas I was thinking of in my head while I was doing this. But once I was able to set out the parts and see what I had to work with is when I started, crystallizing the idea a little more. And this is just an example of how sometimes I just gave up. on that piece because it wasn't super important. Here I'm using a combination wire brush to clean the insides and the outsides of the pipe. Having a nice clean joint makes the solder go on a lot easier when you're trying to make them stick together. Yeah, and at this point I'm roughly framing stuff out. That stuff you see there that I'm brushing on around the joints is what's called flux, and what that does when you're soldering piping is it actually, once you heat it up, it'll draw that melted solder down into the joint so that you have a firm fitting. Generally, it's so it doesn't leak when you're doing water pipes, but obviously I'm not worried about anything leaking in this little project. There was a lot of trial and error, just because that's kind of the way some of these projects go sometimes, and that's why I like to, not start out with a hard idea on paper. Like, some people do like to do that. I just personally don't like to work that way. I like to have the ability to just change my plan as I'm going. If you have a solid plan, sometimes when that plan falls through, what do you do from there? You have to stop everything, try and rethink it, but if I'm just fluid as I go, I find it's faster for actually coming up with ideas. At this point, I'm trying to measure how far out the lamp needed to be for it to have its gravity centered over the base, and tried best I could to account for copper. At this point, I'm using a wire wheel on my drill to brush up all the copper, because it got in pretty rough shape and scorched from all the torching I was doing and untorching and stuff. I wasn't being careful because I knew I was going to do this. So it's polished up pretty good here, and then if you mix water and salt, or vinegar and salt actually, white vinegar and salt, and you let the salt dissolve in it, it polishes up copper quite nicely. Once it's polished, I had to drill some holes. I had quite a time fighting the wire through the actual piping, but it's not like I could run it through before I put it together because the heat would have melted everything, so that really wasn't an option. And I actually wanted to make one of those turnstile water valves into the switch, but that just ended up not being practical. And then here I'm actually doing the wiring. So I'm wiring the brand new wiring into all those fixtures, and actually, even though it was old when I took it off, all those wires underneath for the actual sockets for the bulbs themselves, the wires were in pristine condition. So after I wire nutted all the connections, I then electrical taped them also. I always like to go a little overboard on the safety, especially since the entire apparatus is made of conductive metal. It's a good idea to be safe. Then at this point, I still hadn't figured out how I was going to actually hang the light from it, and I just took a bunch of spare parts I had collected from my bin, sat them all out, and just sifted through them until I found what I wanted to mount it, and I ended up going with a ceiling hook because I thought it looked neater than all my other options. Then finished putting the whole thing together.